Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's quickly continue our framework. So I was reminded in the comments that I missed something on the get all function here. There's a missing semicolon at the end, so thanks for that. Let's save that. Okay, great. So we are done with our model.php. Let me actually just close all files that are open here so that we have a clean interface. Okay, so the next thing we need to create is one of these models, and let's start with session.php. So let's create a session class. We don't need a constructor. I've noticed I rarely use constructors in my classes. I don't know why. I think I don't really know why. I've just noticed now that I don't usually use those. Anyway, so the session class is where we're going to store user information that's logged in. Now, this particular class can be a static class if you want to, and I think it's actually better if it's a static class because you can avoid instantiating it all the time. So for example, in this case, we can do something like public static function like that, and one of the functions we will need in here is the get or the set function. Let's start with that, shall we? Now in this case, when we do something like this, it means we don't need to create an instance of this class. We can simply call this function by saying session like that, and then dot and say get, and then run that function. So this could be a good way. The advantage of this is that you save time and code because you don't have to do something like is equal to new session like that. Okay, and then normally this is what you would do, and then session, and then use get, something like that, right? So it's this versus that. So obviously this is a lot of code, more than this, but at least you instantiate it once and then it gets to be shorter, because then you can even do this if you want to and just make it s is equal to that. So my only issue with with the static version is that I'll have to type out the entire name all the time and then do that. But I kind of like the static workflow because it's less bulky on the memory. But these are small classes, so I don't mind instantiating them so I can use shorter names like that. This is the only issue I have with static versions. So let's just go with the dynamic version, shall we? So we're going to say public function set. Now, set is going to be where we set variables into the session. Now, you don't need the session class. You can simply type out the session variable like so, and then add variables to it, right? Like, or add values to variables in there. So you can set maybe user data like that, and then say is equal to something, right? It's as simple as that. You can use that. Now, the advantage of using other functions to access the session is that in future you may want to add more functionality, and you may want to change how your website stores user data, for example. Let's give an example of where you want to change where or which array key you're using to save user data. Maybe you don't like this key anymore and you want to say, let's use user data 1 or something. Now, in a situation where you were using this directly, it means you have to go through your entire website and change wherever you used user data and change that, right? Now, that can be okay if your website is small. However, if you have many plugins and a lot going on your website, it's a huge website, this will be quite a nightmare. It can be done, but you'll miss a few of those and you may have errors while you're running your system. What would be better is if you just had one function that deals with all of that, and the moment you came to that function and changed how it works, the entire website is updated that's always easier to do. So that's why sometimes even these mundane hard-coded stuff here, you may want to create a simple function to do that for you, so it's easier to change things in the long run. What I found with web design is that it's good to think into the future for when you want to edit things on your website, because there are times when, so sorry I'm rambling on and on here, but there are times when the website is live and users are using the website and you need to make a change very quickly. You don't have time to go through and check every file to make sure that those files are actually edited. And then when you're updating the files, you may need to shut down the website for a bit so that people don't end up saving the wrong data. Whereas in this case, you're replacing one file with one function and it takes like a second. So this is why sometimes it's better to create your own function to do the simple things as well. So in this case, I want, let's add, we don't need this to be public, this can be private. So say private, what do I call this one? var key, something like this. Or let's just use camel case like this. Var key is equal to, so this is the key that we're going to be using for our application to store values in the session. Because there's only one session variable and we can choose which key to store that data in. For example, on this localhost, if I have several websites on my localhost, they share the session variable. So I could use this to differentiate between applications so that I store my data in a different key compared to another website. So here I can say application 1 or something, then that changes where the data is stored so it doesn't interfere with another website. So in this case, var key and user key. So this one we're just going to store inside user. So you can put whatever variable names you want here. You don't even need to capitalize them. They can be any text as long as it's not a number. Oh, wait a second. It can it be a number? I don't know. Array keys can be a number, I think. Can start with a number and letters. I don't know. I've never thought about that. So here, I just want this to return a boolean when we are done, true or false. And then when we set here, I expect a key here, which is a string really, but then we should be able to accept an array as well. So this one is going to be called key or array, something like that, right? This could be a string or an array, that's fine, but it's the key. And then the value, of course, this would probably be a mixed value here. I'm not sure. You could store anything here. So let's just say value over here, like that. Okay, and then we return a boolean. So of course, let's do return false in case none of this happens, so you can tell whether the value is set or not. So when we want to save an item in the session, this is the function we use. So we check, first of all, is this an array or a string? So if is array like that, and we're talking about the key or array, then we go this direction. If it isn't, we go this direction. So let's start for when it's just a string and it's not a okay, we need to make sure that session was started in the index.php page. Okay, so there is session start there, so that's important. Or we could put a function here that checks to see if the session was started, and then we start it if it wasn't. So how you would go about doing that is just by saying something like private start session or something like this. Private function start session, and then all we do here is just start the session. Here we can return an int, maybe let's say return 1. You can do whatever you want really. So if we can say session there's I think there's session status. There's a constant PHP session none. I hope these are the right things I'm doing here, because I do these things once and then I end up forgetting. So there's a session status. There's something called session status here. So what you can do if you forget any of this stuff, you can just copy this, and let's go to our index.php page. And right here, once we do a session start, or before session start, I will just say echo, or we can say print readable if you're not sure whether this will return an array or an expression or a string. Let's just do session status and see what it gives us. Alright, so if I go back, let me just go back to the home page here. Okay, so it gives me the value 1, which means it is started, right? Which I think it is. So, or is it not started? So let's do a copy here. Let me copy this and do this after we start the session, right? So before we start the session and then after we start the session. Let's see if there's a difference between those two. So if I refresh, yeah, so there is a difference. When we start, it's before we start it's 1, once we start it's 2. So you can just see 2 represents when the session has started, right? But this is actually a constant. So let me try and do this. The constant just represents an integer which you may forget. Sometimes you may forget, is it 1 or 2? But just by using this constant here, it represents an actual integer. So it should represent the number 2. But let me mute this one here so that we only see that thing at the top there. So I'm going to come back and try to refresh. Oh, so that represents 1, right? Yeah. So PHP session none represents 1, which means it hasn't started yet. So I'm correct on that one. So, which is good actually. So this means we can check if a session was started. Let me copy this part. Let's not taint the index.php page. So in essence, what we're saying is that if session status returns a 1, then it means the session hasn't started. So then we can do session start. Now, since this is just one item in here, we just don't need to put those curly braces. So just by doing that, we make sure that our session is started. So you can do this on all of these functions just to make sure the session is started. In case you move this class to another project, you don't need to worry about the session start because it can do it on its own. So let's do this. Like that. Oh, it's actually start session. Okay, so let's go start session like so. Okay, so this start session. So we start the session here and then we do what we want to do. So in this case, I just want to store data in my session variable. And then what key do I use? I want to use this key here. Since I'm storing this data, these are variables I'll be storing in here, so I'm going to use the var key over here. So I'll copy that one, and this is what I will put in here, but I will use this keyword like that. So there we go. This var key is equal to whatever value the user has supplied and wants to set. So this is exactly what we need to do over here as well. But in this case, because the key is an array, oh, wait a minute, sorry, forgot something here. There's this key or array that was given. So in this case, this is just a normal key. We have to add it here as well, like that. So this is an array within an array. So the overall boss, the overall array is this one, but in there we have compartments of these items we are putting in there. So I will copy this and put it there as well. Now, since this key or array is actually an array in this case, we want to loop through it. So this way you can actually save a lot of data as an array into your session. So there's key and the value, but actually we don't really care about these. Oh no, we do care, the key and value pair. Okay, sorry, my bad. Now this means this is optional, because if you give us an array of key value pairs, you don't really need to give us a value. So over here we can just put that as no, give it a default value so we don't have to put it there, but this is required, that's optional. So if that's optional, then value is replaced by that, and then we put it there, and then this key over here is what we put here instead, like so. Okay, so this is how you save multiple values. This is how you save one value, and then you can return true if you want afterwards here. Return true, like so. Alright, so that is great. This is how we set, and of course, since we can set a value, it's good to be able to get a value. So let's use the get here. Now in this case, whether when setting these things we had put an array, doesn't matter because that array is looped through. So each item has a single key which is in form of a string, so we just need a key and we don't need the value, we just need to know what key we are getting. So get a string key, we start our session. We don't need to ask any of this. All we need to ask is, does it exist? So I'm just going to remove this part here, and let me put the return text over here. Right now it's up to you what you want to return when getting a string or you don't find what you're looking for. Do you return false? Do you return null? Do you return an empty string? So all that depends on your use case. Let's leave it at return false. We can change it later if we think this is not good enough. So let's see, return blah blah blah. We check in the var key, and then we check whatever key was given, and then we return that, like so. Okay, but of course we need to check if this actually exists. So we can do this by saying if not empty, and then we put that guy in there, like so. So if that actually exists, it's not empty, let's return. Not empty also checks whether the thing exists or not before trying to access it. So that's all we need for the get. And then in this same vein, we need to be able to authenticate a user. So here we're just going to call this one auth, like that. And we'll expect a mixed value, but usually it's either an object or an array, right? Could be object or array, and this is usually the user row. So I'm just going to say row, like that. So when we authenticate the user, all we are doing is saving data, that user row, into the session, right? So we're going to use this key instead, the user key, because user data, that's where we're going to save. We don't really need to separate the two, but I think it's just neater this way. So auth there, let's replace those guys. And in this case, oh, let's see, wait. Use, okay, so this is equal to row. Let me remove this. I don't need to check if this is empty at all. We just need to start the session, and then boom. Wait a minute. Wait. Okay, so we return true here because things will work, I guess. So session, this user key is equal to whatever row was supplied there. Maybe we could put an if statement where we just check if we don't need to do that because we've specified here that it should be an object or an array, so this is fine. Alrighty then, short there, and then one more where we check to see if the user is logged in. So we're going to call this one is logged in. So this is for us to check if a user is logged in, of course. So we don't need to supply anything, and this returns a boolean, true or false. If the user is logged in, we get true. If not, it's false. So let's start with that, and then let's check if this is an object. So we say if not empty that, and then you can say and. You don't need to put an and there. We can go deeper, one level deep, but not too far there. Actually, it's better to start with the negative value, or the negative version of the if statement. So if empty, for example, if this is empty, we know that's empty. Let's just return false right away. Let's just say return false, because there's no need for us to go further. If there's nothing in there, it means this user is obviously not logged in. Then you can put another if statement here and say if is object like that. Let's get this guy. So if this is an object, return true. And you can also put if this is an array, return true. So return true. Then you can duplicate this as well. If this is an array, return true. Like that. All right. Great. Otherwise, we return false. Now, of course, you can do more stringent checks here. You don't just need to check if there's an object with user data. You may want to scrutinize that and check your database to make sure that that user actually exists in your database, or maybe you put a checksum value to do some extra checks, but that's entirely up to you. We can use this simple version for now. What else do I need here? Oh, we need to log out, because if we can log in, we need to also be able to log out. So in this case, we just say public function logout, like that, right? We return true or false as well. So we start our session. Great. Now, if not empty this, then all we need to do is unset that guy. So I'm just going to grab this and just say unset. Bam. And that's it. Now, we are simply unsetting the user data, and that's enough to count as a logout. Now, it's up to you. You could do session regenerate or something like that. Session regenerate ID, something like this. And also add something like session destroy, something like that, to destroy the session. So session destroy, session regenerate ID, these are good ways to reset your session if you want. So instead of using this on the logout, we can actually create a session reset function and put it there. So let's do that. Public function reset, right? So in this case, we will put these guys there. Now these guys completely delete the session file and create a new one. That's what will happen here. Session destroy, session regen. I don't know which one should come first. I think the order should be like this. So we destroy the session and then we create a new ID. Yeah, maybe that makes sense. Okay, public function reset. Here, let's return a boolean as well. We don't really need a return value, because if you don't put a return value, it just returns null. But it's just good practice to return something, you know. Okay, so there we go. Logout. Now, the reason I don't add the session destroy right here on the logout is because sometimes you don't want that. Because let's say, for example, somebody is shopping on your page, So they are saving data into the cart. Now the cart really is just the session, right? Now let's say they want to pay and they decide to log in, or so when they log in, you don't want to lose that session data. You still want it there. Also, if let's say for some reason they log out even by accident, you don't want them to lose what's in the cart. So you don't really want to regenerate the session all the time when you do log in and log out. So I find that a bit too much. So let's remove this here. So the logout just unsets that, return true, I guess, and that should do it. Okay, now one more function here, and then we can call it a day on this one. Now, of course, please, you can put comments on these things if you want to remember what each function does, because sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. Also, let me put that restriction. Oh, wait, which function? Which class? Oh, so I only added this in here, right? So let me just copy that and let me put it here. This is really unnecessary, but you never know. You may need it. It's just redundancy. Let's come back to session. We've added it there. Boom, model. Direct script access denied. Okay, where else? Session. There we go. So finally, down here after logout, there's one more function called, okay, so I've already duplicated this. This one is called user. I just want us to be able to grab a key from the user. So this is a string key, and we're gonna say key is, oh, wait, yeah, this should be optional. Let's put an empty string there. And instead of returning a boolean, we can return a mixed value here. Or you don't even need to put a return type, that's up to you. Okay, so in this case here we have, yeah, we want to make sure this is not empty. That's great. Wait a second. Okay, so we expect a key. What this function is supposed to do is, whichever user is logged in, let's say you want to know the ID of the user that's logged in, this is the function you get. And you put your key there as ID, then you need to return the user's ID. So in this case, we'll check if that item in that key actually exists. So what we return here will depend if it's an object or an array, right? So first of all, let's check if this is not empty, right? Now, if it is empty, I prefer to return, what can I return here? Maybe no, like that, right? Let's say the return a no if we don't find what we're looking for. But before I actually check whether there's a key in there, because I don't know whether to use this bracket notation, because we use that if it's an array, but we use this if it's an object. So the best to do is to check, actually. So I'm going to do this. We say if this is not empty, right? Let's go this way. And then we'll check if is object, right? Let's say if is object this item, then we return. Oh, wait, sorry about that. Then we check, we do another if is not empty. I don't need those curly braces. So if it's an object, we'll check with this, like so. So if not empty, then return it. So I'm going to grab that. Then we'll say return that. Alright. Let's do an else statement. And in this else, we're going to use check for an array to make sure we don't get any errors. And let's remove that final else. So in this case, instead of this notation, we're going to use that square bracket like this, and same here. square bracket. Alrighty then, so we have returned what we want here and here as well. Okay, great. Now there's also a situation where the key is not provided. In this case, I want this to return the entire thing, right? So I'm going to copy this. If not empty, blah, 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 key, whatever, that's great. Now, before we even begin to check for these key value pairs, we should check to see if it's empty. So we'll say if empty, that key that was given, then in this case, we're just going to return the entire thing, whether it's an array or an object or something like that, like so. Okay, so if this is empty, the key is empty, let's return the whole thing. If, however, the key is not empty, we check to see if this guy is an object or an array so that we can use the correct syntax on either of these. So I hope I haven't missed anything here. Very, very cool. All right, so that wraps it up for the... We can add more functions here as we go. That's up to you. Let me just confirm everything is great, and I think it indeed is. All right, so that's our session thingy here. So to use this, we'll just instantiate it and use it as we need. Now let's deal with the request.php class here.